and welcome to this May meeting of the Barossa Assessment Panel. I take this opportunity to welcome members and staff and those who have joined us in the gallery this evening and online. Now, as we do have just start by introducing the members to you. So, the members to my right, we have Graham Burns, and to my left, we have Rachel Nucky and Sarah Elding, and my name is Jeff Parsons. I'm the presiding member. We do have an apology, unfortunately, this evening from Councillor Jane Evans, who can't be with us. So we'll make sure that's noted down in the minutes. Now, we do have a few administrative items to get through, so I'll just work through those and then we'll introduce our first development assessment item for consideration this evening. Now, members, the confirmation of the minutes. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 1st of April have been received by members. Anyone have any questions in relation to the minutes? No? Someone prepared to move that they be adopted, please? Sarah, thank you. And seconder, Rachel, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. So any business arising from the minutes that any member would like to discuss? No? And do we have any declaration of interest by any member on the panel this evening? Yes, Sarah?
Yes, I have an interest with item 6.1.
Thank you. We will make sure that's noted down in the minutes, and when we get to that item momentarily, I'll ask you to step out of the meeting. We'll call you back in after that. When I did the introductions earlier, it was remiss of me not to acknowledge that we're joined by members of Council's administration this evening. Our Assessment Manager, Aaron, to my left, and other members of Council's staff, including our planning officers who are with us. So, welcome. Now, we are at item 6.1, so Sarah, if I can ask you just to step out of the room, please. Now, we still have a quorum with 3 members left. So this item before us this evening, members, this is located at 2591 Stir Highway, Nuruyupta. It is for the construction of a telecommunications facility consisting of a 30-metre monopole, antennas, equipment cabinet and security fencing. The applicant is Wavecon Operations Proprietary Limited in the rural zone, was performance assessed and notified, and we did receive a number of representations. Tom, you are the assessing officer for the application. Is there anything you'd like to take us through as an introduction to the item, please?
You covered it pretty well. It's a telecommunication tower, 30 metres tall, at 2591 Sturt Highway, Nuruyupta. It's kind of in a corner portion of a site of an existing landscape supply type use yard. The applicant is online on Teams if there's any questions or discussion that you guys see fit with them. Cheers.
Thank you, Tom, and that's right. We do have Mr. Mark Barty online. So now, as I said, we did receive a number of representations, but none indicated a desire to be heard. So there's no formal hearing of representations, but there is an opportunity, members, for you if you have any questions you would like to pose to the applicant. I can ask them to respond. Do you have any questions?
Just one.
Yeah.
Mark is online.
So, Mark, can I just ask you? Hopefully, I think your microphone's just been switched on. You can hear us, okay?
I can. How are you, everyone?
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Mark, Graham Burns. Hi. Mark, can you
switch your microphone on, Graham?
You've been doing this for many, many years. Thank you. I hope you can hear me now. There's a similar monopole structure in the main street of Newry, towards the northern end. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it strikes me to be very similar to the proposal that's before us. Now, do you know much about that monopole sign? It's amongst the new and used car outlets on Murray Street on the western side, but if you don't know about it, I don't want to.
I do know the site that you're talking about. Are you simply trying to say
very simply
whether that's a similar sort of thing?
Exactly right. If you do know anything about it, can you advise whether or not the proposal that's before us tonight is the same or similar to that monopole?
I would say it's similar. Would that be Cracker Drive?
Well, it's set back from Murray Street, but
Yeah,
it,
I think that's it.
it may well be.
Yeah. So that one's actually a 40-metre pole.
Oh, okay.
So
That is
that
good.
one is 10 metres higher than this one. That one accommodates Optus and Telstra on that pole, but I can see it here on the database. So
Thank you.
it's similar in terms of its overall appearance, of course, but it's 10 metres taller.
Thank you.
No
No,
problem.
no other questions.
Yes, Rachel. Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Rachel Nucky here.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. I guess I just, like, in reading through it, like, I'm generally really comfortable with it, but I was more interested in, like, your site selection process. And, like, you mentioned that this is all about strategic forward planning for the infrastructure, yet in what I read in your material, I couldn't actually see any data to support and highlight the areas of deficiency that you talked about and show where other infrastructure kind of is, and then link that back to your site selection process, because you kind of said that that was based on an algorithm, but I kind of wanted to understand how you kind of went about that site selection process and looking at like physical attributes of a site. Like, how did you go about considering all that? I think I'd like to just understand that a little bit better.
Oh, sorry, Mark. I think you're back muted.
Whoops, sorry, Graham, you should have caught me out there. So in the planning statement that was supplied with the application, on page 2, there was a sort of a high-level analysis of where existing facilities are located. And this particular location is more than 2 kilometres from the nearest site, which is actually the one that Graham mentioned just a moment ago, which is about 2.2 kilometres away. And then the next nearest are down in well inside Nuriupa, down in Murray Street around the Telstra Exchange. So the whilst this is as you mentioned, a strategic program to sort of get ahead of the curve, and is part of a number of members of the panel have heard from me before that the telco world has changed in terms of Telstra and Optus and Vodafone, or TPG Vodafone as they're called now, are not they don't roll out their own structures and stuff anymore. They've decided to divest all of that physical infrastructure and acquisition functions to what are called towercos. Wavecon is one of them. Indara is another one, and Telstra have an offshoot called Amplitel. So the panel won't see applications from Telstra and Optus and Vodafone anymore. They'll see them from the tower providers. So as I mentioned there, Wavecon has an algorithm that has been quite successful in terms of predicting where carriers are going to want to go. That's based on where existing infrastructure is, and other things like demand from things like rezoning or things like that might be changing. So this one this area has been selected because it's well away from another site. It's on a major transport corridor. There's lots of other things happening in that general area, such as the service centre, etc., that demand more network capacity and coverage. So when Wavecon has decided where that general area is, the normal process is to sort of scope that area by usually by, first of all, a mail out, and to see who in that general area is interested or wants to respond. Sometimes that doesn't work. In this instance, it did, and then discussions, if there's more than one interested party, discussions start to see who's most interested on commercial terms and all that sort of stuff, who's got access and space and all the things that we need. So although I haven't spoken specifically about any sites, any other locations, they are generally in that area. There were some on the southern side of the Sturt Highway, but we've landed on this one. We think this is the better spot for it to be in terms of the land use that's with. So that's the sort of iterative process that we go through. But in terms of, although this is not specifically for a carrier, the carriers do give Wavecon general information about areas that they're interested in, so that helps guide that as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
I think that's all of our questions. So thank you, Mark. You're welcome to stay online and observe the process. Members, do you have
Thanks.
any questions you'd like to ask Tom, the administration?
No.
No. In that case, members, I seek your views in respect of this matter. We do have a thorough report from the administration before us, and all of the application documentation, including the representations that we've received, and a recommendation for planning consent to be granted. Rachel, thanks.
Yeah, look, I don't have much of an issue with it. I just wanted to understand that whole site selection process a bit better, and I think it was a good exercise to go through. Look, these are just a necessary piece of essential infrastructure that we see in our environment now. I don't believe it's going to have any significant visual impact. It's not dissimilar to a lot. Driving along that section of the Sturt Highway, there is some fairly newer electricity kind of poles that have gone up that have just as much of an impact, if not more, because they're in the middle of the highway. Look, I think these are necessary. They're not dissimilar to the light poles. It's slimline. The colour finish will kind of blend and disappear. I don't have any major issues with it. I think I agree and concur with the recommendation of the officer. And I think also too they're necessary for, like if you're looking at emergency services, I think we really need to look at coverage across areas that don't have good coverage. In regional areas, I think especially, it's so important to get that coverage for emergency services that, yeah, I just think this is a supportable development.
Thank you. Graham? Yeah.
Just very quickly, I totally agree with what Rachel's just said. The other thing I would say is, from my inspection of the locality, is it's characterised by some pretty mature tall trees. There's a lot of vegetation in the locality. There are buildings in the locality. And in addition to the structures that Rachel mentioned, there's light poles, tall light poles, so at night time they're quite visible because they're illuminated, of course. So it's not a locality that's without its either natural or built form that will help to soften the visual effect of this pole. I mean, the fact of the matter is it has to be to some extent visible, otherwise it might lose line of sight and defeat the purpose of it being in this location. But I think it's an acceptable location in an area which, according to the applicant's representative, I won't use the term dark spot or black spot, but it's clearly is required for the telecommunications future needs. So I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you. And look, I have similar views, members. I might just say, and I know we'll come to these resolutions shortly, I didn't think it was seriously at variance, didn't think it was a grave departure from the applicable policies. I didn't think it undermined the character values of the district, although it does have an impact from a visual amenity perspective. I think, as you both described, that's acceptable given what exists in the locality. The only other 2 points I really wanted to touch on was I didn't think the galvanised finish was a concern, because you are in a rural area, you're likely to get those other sort of galvanised finishes on other buildings, and it is near an employment zone and on a major transport route. And I know in the past I've always had the view that if the sites aren't vegetated, I think there should always be some effort to put screening around the compound. You can never screen the structure itself with vegetation, but I think it's important to screen the compound. But I didn't think the lack of landscaping in the proposal here was problematic because of the fact, as you both alluded to, there's so much vegetation in the locality already, which really does form an effective screen. So it sounds as if we are all in agreement. And that being the case, we do have 3 separate recommendations before us. The first is that we resolve that the proposal is not seriously at variance with the code. I'm prepared to... Rachel, thank you. Seconder, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. I suspect there'll be a similar voting process as we move through this, but the second recommendation is that the Character Preservation Act is, I guess, not... Well, the proposal doesn't undermine the objects of that act. Someone prepared? Yep, Graham, thank you. Rachel, thank you. All those in favour? And lastly, that the panel chooses to grant planning consent. It is subject to a couple of conditions there and a number of advisory notes. Again, someone prepared to move? Rachel, thank you. And a seconder? Graham, thank you. All those in favour? And so that is carried. So for the benefit of Mark, who I think is still online, planning consent has been granted to that proposal. Obviously, building consent, development approval are still required. If you do have any questions, then feel free to contact the administration next business day. And thank you for your attendance.
Certainly, thank you. Good evening.
Now, members, we must now invite Sarah back. So excellent, thank you. And we now have our second assessment item for consideration. So this is an application 69 to 71 Murray Street in Nuriutpa. It is for the construction of a car wash comprising 3 manual bays, 2 automatic bays, 5 vacuum bays, erection of pylon, advertising sign and installation of associated signage, acoustic fencing and landscaping. The applicant's Anrash Netley, Proprietary Limited in the Township Activity Centre Zone, performance assessed, notified, and Aaron was the assessing officer for the application. So do you have anything you'd like to take us through as an introduction, Aaron?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, look, a detailed report's been provided for your consideration. As noted in the report, the development was subject to public notice. There's a number of representations and several that wish to be heard. So there will be a hearing of representations. The applicant, their representatives are here, Mark Wikowski and Renee Gruder, to respond to representations. Look, it is quite a challenging proposal in terms of there's a number of elements to consider in relation to the proposal, and that relates to land use, the impact of noise, lighting. It is a main street with a number of heritage buildings, so we've done a detailed assessment of the locality. I guess how this building will, or buildings will sit on the site, and in relation to its siting and setbacks, and how it complements the, I guess, or fits with the character of existing buildings. Access and traffic have been carefully considered. It was subject to referral to Commissioner of Highways. So there's been a number of elements considered through it. There has been amendments to the design through the process, and including taking on board feedback from staff. So ultimately, on balance, I've recommended the granting of planning consent, and then happy to take any further questions either now or afterwards. So thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate that. Now, I might, as Aaron mentioned, we did have a number of representations and some requested to be heard. I might just check if we've got those representatives with us. So I had Mr. David Marino, Miss Anne-Marie Ward. Are they with us? No? Okay. And then I also had Miss Donna Fay. Is Miss Fay with us? Miss Fay. Right. So because you're here, I'll just run through how this process works, just some information for you. And we might have a representation for the following item too, a couple of representations, so this information should be useful to you all. So this is really an opportunity for you to highlight any key points in your representation that you want the panel to consider. Once all representatives have addressed the panel, the applicant is given the opportunity to respond. Now, for applicants and representatives, we do normally grant 5 minutes to speak to the panel. I do normally just keep track of time, and that's just so we can provide procedural fairness to everyone. If you get close to that mark, I'll just ask you to begin summing up. I think it's important to note the panel has copies of all of the written representations that have been submitted, as well as the applicant's response. So, as I said, there's really a chance for you to highlight any key points. When it's your turn to speak, I'll invite you just to step up to the table here, a microphone for you so we can make sure we hear you properly. Now, often the panel might have questions of you when you finish speaking, so I'll obviously ask that when you get to the end of your presentation. Normally, the panel does have more questions of applicants than representatives. That's simply because the applicants have detailed knowledge of the proposal and we need to delve down into that. Once you've spoken, there's no further opportunity to be heard, but you are welcome to return to your seat and observe the decision-making process. The panel's role is not one where we need to mediate between the parties, so our role is one where we take the information that you give us, as well as all the information that's presented to us in our agenda, and we use that to make a balanced planning judgment about whether or not the proposal should warrant approval. And the final thing to say is if you've never done this before, it can be daunting, but there's absolutely no need for it to be. The panel's genuinely interested in what you have to say. So all of that said, I'm happy to invite you up. Donna, if you just come up to the table here. Good, mate. Yeah. So there should be a little button just at the base of the microphone there, Donna. So, yeah, you can start when you're ready.
I can guarantee it will not take 5 minutes. So, yes, it is a little daunting. I think in our letter we're a place of worship. And our key times are 9 till 12, 12:30 every Saturday. So it is a weekly worship service. We then have a community lunch after that till about 3. So we felt as a church, if we don't speak now, we don't get another opportunity. We are really concerned about the flow of traffic as our front entrance is facing the business. So we don't actually enter from the front of the church. You will see that our entrance is, the 2 driveways are side by side. And so we operate all down that side. That fence that will be the divider is our main thoroughfare as well as our entrance. We don't have any glazing on our windows or any soundproofing. We do have parishioners who are hearing impaired. We don't have a loop in our church or anything like that. We do, we really struggle on days like Vintage Festival when the parades are going, and so we do hear a lot of noise. We are across the road obviously from CFS as well, so all of that noise is something that does impact us. So we're thinking that manual bays, I'm assuming, are pressure cleaners, and the vacuums. I don't know how you measure that noise or what the impact, and I'm sure there's been, noise impact assessments done and so forth. So really we're just really concerned about the noise. And being a Saturday morning could actually be quite a key time for use of the proposed venue as well.
Thanks, Donna. You made your points very well. Do you have any questions you would like to ask members?
Only one.
Sure.
I think it's only one. I've had a look at the site as well and walked past the church from Kapunda Road. You mentioned, I think, that the entrance is off Kapunda Road, adjacent to the site. Is that right? You've got the property, the site
Yep.
of the proposed development.
Yep.
That's your driveway entrance.
Well, we've got a car driveway down the western side, would it be? Yeah, but our walking entrance is on that same side. Yeah.
So the Kapunda Road entrance is not a vehicle entrance, it's just walking.
It's not marked as disabled, but we do allow people to sort of come up in, because it does have a guttering, like it does have a driveway. We do allow drop-off for disabled as well on that side, but that is, the sliding doors are to there. So when people walk out and small children walk out, they're walking out onto that footpath, which will now be more of a traffic flow.
Okay.
So.
If I may, a second question. Have you looked at the agenda and all the amendment plans and the noise report that you made reference to? Have you read the documents?
Not in fine detail. Just, can you?
No, well,
Yeah.
there was an acoustic noise report
Yeah,
by
okay.
Sonus, for example.
Yep.
And the Sonus report has made recommendations about the acoustic treatments that are required
Yeah.
to ensure that disturbance to neighbours such as yourself and this nearby house as well will be minimised.
Was that the fencing?
And within the limits
Yeah.
set by the NBN.
Yeah.
So you have.
I know that there's the fencing. Yeah, the acoustic panelling. Yeah. Okay.
There's other treatments required.
Yeah. Okay.
Concerns, but I just wanted you to be aware of the fact that a lot of the concerns that you raised,
Yeah.
I think and hope that have been addressed
Yeah.
by the reports.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? No? In that case, thanks, Donna. You're welcome to retake your seat and, like I said, observe the discussion. Now, we have representatives for the applicant to respond. Renee Greeder and Mark Kwiatkowski, I assume you're both responding? Oh, okay, just you, Renee. Excellent. So,
Good evening, panel. I don't know if you can hear me properly. My name's Renee Greeder of Future Urban, and I have with me Mark Witkowski. Mark's here representing Andrash for any operational questions that you guys might have, and I'll be here to respond to representations. We acknowledge the representation submitted by Donna on behalf of the church next door. As was outlined in our written response, the first point I'd like to make is the zone is a township activity centre zone. It is a mixed-use zone. Places of worship are not identified as sensitive receivers by definition in the code, so we don't have the same, I guess, sensitivity as a, for example, dwelling might have in terms of impact and interface issues. That said, we do have expert advice provided by SONUS, who are a well-regarded acoustic engineering firm. They have done a noise policy assessment. What was found from that is with the implementation of recommended noise mitigation methods, such as the acoustic walls to the southern and the western boundaries, the implementation of glass barriers for the automatic bays, and the use of other construction methods, the noise policy is achieved at the boundaries of the site, not only for the church within the Township Activity Centre, but considering the site to the south being used as a dwelling within the Activity Centre zone, that is also achieved at their boundary. With respect to traffic, there has been changes through the process. We did initially try to get two-way access in and out off both streets. DIT and Council Administration advised strongly against that for traffic impacts at the intersection. We now have one way in and one way out only. So for cars travelling in a southern direction down Murray Street, you cannot undertake a right-hand turn into the site. You can only access it left in only, left out only onto Old Kapunda Road, which is adjacent to the church. With respect to pedestrian safety, I think left out only is probably as safe as you're going to get. We don't have people having to look both ways trying to undertake right-hand turns. Exiting the site can be done safely, slowly, and looking only in one direction. With respect to traffic as well, whilst there are sort of operations happening at the same time, the church may be peaking on a Saturday, as may the car wash. There's no reason why the two can't coexist at the same time. The site is well equipped to handle its peak demand without impacting on street parking on Old Kapunda Road, so no impacts to the church users in that regard. And yeah, the site can accommodate its traffic within the road network without any adverse impacts. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Members, questions? I can start. I do just have one, and it's just a point of clarification, because you did say this, so in my reading of the SONUS report, I couldn't see it stated as unequivocally as this, but essentially that, because the church isn't a sensitive receiver, like you said, and my reading of it was that the noise criteria was met at all sensitive receivers, but I wasn't sure if that actually included the church or not. And so I guess I just had a question around that, and whether
sure.
and I know you're not an acoustic engineer, neither are the rest of us, but if you could shed any light on that, that would be helpful.
Yes, I am not an acoustic engineer. My reading of the report is it looked at the receivers as both Township Activity Centre Zone and Neighbourhood Zone, whilst we're talking about the house to the south as a sensitive receiver, and that was clarified in its own right. The church is grouped into Township Activity Centre Zone. So what the noise policy is expected for that zone is met. Yeah.
Any other questions, members? Yes.
Oh, do I have to? Oh, not letting me speak. I just would like some clarification. When I took a look at the site today, I noted that on the corner there's an existing freestanding sign that's got some floodlights. That coming down? Because on the plans didn't even show it. and it didn't, there was nothing mentioned about that at all. So I just want to clarify that is not staying.
Thank you, Rachel. Confirming it will be removed, yes.
Thank you. Yes.
With regards to the operation of the facility, is there an expectation that there will be music played during its open hours?
No, there is not.
And I guess if I can add on to that, I did have a question around the operating hours, and I know that the panel has raised this, and you were kind enough to respond today. It is proposed for 24/7 operation, and while I certainly acknowledge the acoustic report and the information we've been given, it strikes me that that level of operation might be somewhat unusual in this locality when you look at the existing uses that are surround it. So I guess I'm flagging that that's potentially something that the panel may want to consider further when it gets into the debate, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us what your views are around that.
Yeah.
I guess from a commercial perspective, my client Anrash would prefer a 24-hour operation, noting, I guess, that the acoustic report or environmental noise assessment has advised that it's suitable and meets the criteria. I guess if it's the difference between an approval or refusal in this instance, then my client has advised that we'll consider hours of operation put forward by the panel.
If I may add to that, Jeff, just from a planning code assessment perspective, PO 2.1 of the interface between land uses policy talks about non-residential development not unreasonably impacting amenity of sensitive receivers through its hours of operation, having regard to a number of items. I guess the nature of development, we've spoken, well, the written documents talk to the appropriateness of the land use within this zone. Mitigation of off-site impacts. We have, like I said, the SONUS report in which the plans reflect all those recommendations and achieve the noise policy. We have WGA's support with respect to traffic and a number of changes made to enhance that impact. And then it finally talks about, again, measures that might be taken in an adjacent zone primarily for sensitive receivers. So considering that one, I guess we are not directly adjoining any neighbourhood type zones. And I've worked on a number of other car wash facilities within the city of Burnside that directly interface with an established neighbourhood zone that are 24-hour operations, of which do coexist quite harmoniously.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, Graham.
This is probably a follow-up to both of you, so both or either of you can answer. You may or may not be aware that we, the panel, considered in the last few months a similar application elsewhere in Europe, where it was agreed with the support of the applicant the hours would be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sorry. So acknowledging that they are daylight hours under EPA terms. I'm not saying here that the panel's between a rock and a hard place, but we are looking for a degree of consistency in decision making. So bearing in mind too what you've just said about, Renee, about the provisions of the code, the interface provisions and so forth, and I'm pleased to hear that your client, Andrash, is happy to accept reduced hours of operation should the application be approved.
I guess if we were to reduce the hours of operation, we'd be potentially looking for a slight increase on Friday and Saturdays, potentially to midnight, if that's the case. No. I guess, but in terms of, I guess, those sort of reductions, we're trying to ensure that the commercial viability of this project is suitable.
Yeah, no.
Sorry to persist, but I'm a bit curious to know when are the busiest times for a facility such as this, a car wash facility such as this? I wouldn't have thought it would be between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m, would it? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't get out enough.
No, it's definitely not. But I guess it gives the facility an operational sort of aspect that makes it more functional over time. So.
Thank you. I think we have exhausted our questions, so thank you very much, Renee and Mark. We appreciate it. Members, do you have any questions you would like to pose to Aaron? Certainly. So thank you. We also just been informed we have a manager of engineering in the gallery, Steve, who's joined us. So if we have any questions infrastructure-wise, we can thankfully pose those to Steve. So thank you. So there we go. Well then, for Steve, yeah. Well then, Steve, if you'd like to step forward, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Hopefully you can answer this because it's actually in relation to the street trees. I support the whole one-way flow through and looking at where the exit is, and I understand that you were looking for some amendments. There was a condition about amending the crossover detail. I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't have a measuring tool on me, but are we still going to be able to achieve, like, do you have a minimum requirement for a metre from the base of the trees such that the street trees won't be compromised where that exit's going? Are you satisfied with that?
Through you, presiding member, our normal standard is a metre. It's also understood that the driveway crossover width at the moment is ample in terms of what's otherwise the minimum. There's the capacity to reduce the width of the crossover to still accommodate the one-way traffic. It's my belief perhaps even the width is a legacy of the perhaps two-way movement that was previously existing, so there's a sense that that could be reasonably adjusted to suit. It also has a flaring mechanism there to ensure that the access and egress is easily accommodated, and the final design I think will tease out all of that, and I'm comfortable that that'll be accommodated in alignment with what you're suggesting as well.
So no impact on the trees?
Correct.
Because those trees, I think, from my perspective, are quite important. They provide quite a good, buffer. They're quite well established.
Members, any further questions for Steve or Aaron?
The only comment I'd perhaps make, it's not so much a question, but Steve, jump in if you need to. I looked at the site today at a time when school pickup was occurring, so 3:30. And there were cars around and kids walking around and being picked up. But I didn't detect that was there was congestion associated with that peak time for the school pickup. Would that be your expectation as well, Steve, that this proposal could, I'll call it, comfortably coexist with the peak times of school pickups that occur on the opposite side of the road associated with the school?
I think the explanation provided by the applicant is correct in terms of left out is by far the simplest and least controversial, least intrusive manoeuvre, and the accommodation for that safely at this site is reasonable and would be achieved.
All right, members, I think that is all of our questions for the staff. So thank you very much, Steve, for making yourself available. Appreciate that. So, members, we obviously have heard from the applicant representatives. You have an excellent quality report from the administration and all of the application documentation, and a recommendation that we grant consent subject to number of reserved matters and conditions. What are your views in respect of this one? Graham, thanks.
Look, yes, there's been a bit of toing and froing between ourselves and Aaron and others as to whether this application is deserving of consent. I believe that it is. I simply made the comment, and the applicants have heard this as well as members of the gallery, that the panel has considered a similar application quite recently at the other end of the street, where it is known as Tanunda Road. But That application was approved with reduced hours of operation because of the panel's concern in that matter about the impact on nearby sensitive users, including residential users. So it was an application that was approved that was not dissimilar to this application. And I think we have, and I simply would have suggested that a condition be drafted that can address my concern about what was to be 24/7 hours of operation, which I've cited, and I'm not sure if that's come up on the screen yet, Aaron, but I've had a chance to read that, as I'm sure all other panel members have, and I think with the inclusion of that condition, if it is a condition, I think it's there in red with my appalling eyesight, I would be happy to support this application, but it may be that there are other considerations as well that I think we should hear from all members before we launch into any consideration of the merits of the application. Thank you.
Look, I concur with Graham's thoughts around the hours. I think it's a wise move, especially given that residents next door, notwithstanding that it is in a township zone, it's still a dwelling. And I think those hours are appropriate for a facility of that nature, kind of given it is a smallish site and where everything is kind of located, it is fairly compact and close. So I would support the inclusion of that condition. Overall, look, I think in the context of the zone, the use is appropriate. I think a number of the key issues around things like light spill and noise have been appropriately addressed and addressed by way of condition. I do note the reserve matters around the landscaping. I was concerned about landscaping because, look, the site, it is built up and it is pretty much all sealed. I think we're lucky that there is some really well-established street trees around the site that do provide a little bit of softening, but I would like to see a fairly comprehensive landscape plan for that perimeter planting, noting that those beds aren't overly large. I did have some initial concerns around the 4 LED screens that I think are fronting Old Kapunda Road. I always have concerns about extent of signage and what's on there. Look, if that signage can be controlled, not scrolling, and is limited to just advertising in line with what the approved use of the site is, look, I can probably live with it. I would like to see a condition added to control that signage, and I think I did suggest one to Aaron earlier today, that basically that the display of information relates to lawful use of the land, so that there's no third-party signage. I think that in terms of ongoing compliance, that's really key to having that on a decision. I am satisfied that the acoustic measures recommended by SONUS are appropriate and achievable for this use, and indeed are fairly standard across these types of land uses. What I would like to see, once again from an ongoing compliance perspective, I would actually like to see those acoustic measures actually imposed by condition. I think ongoing, like with the site, people never look at plans, they look at a decision notification, and I think given the importance of the concerns raised by representatives, I think that's enough to make sure that we actually put them on as conditions, to ensure that we can follow them up and it's really clear about what we're trying to do. I would also like to see an additional reserve matter added to deal with the trade waste, because I note that the reserve matter talks about the wastewater, but that doesn't necessarily... You can either add in the trade waste into that or put a separate thing about addressing trade waste. Trade waste is a big issue, and I know that from working on Kangaroo Island. And I would like to see and definitely have staff look at that to make sure that that is appropriately addressed for the development. So with those couple of little inclusions, I'm fairly satisfied that this is appropriate, and I would be happy to support the recommendation to grant consent subject to those little changes.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Thank you. I agree with and concur with Rachel with regards to the landscaping. I did note, and I looked at the site this afternoon, that there is somewhat of reliance on the existing streetscape. In the landscaping plan, I would really like to see a variation in heights, not just trees with narrow caliper and upper canopy, but also vegetation that can help define the boundary of the site to avoid people walking through, because natural progress, you've got a lot of pedestrian traffic through there, school kids, etc. I think it will assist in I guess, defining that difference between the footpath and also that driveway of the business. I agree, and I'm quite comfortable as well that the acoustic report and the treatments that are proposed satisfy the requirements of the zone, and I think that with some clever operational times as well and some changes to that, we can reduce that impact, particularly for the dwelling as well. But that's all I have to offer at this stage.
Thank you. And look, similar views, members. I don't think it's seriously a variance and won't undermine the attributes of the Character Preservation District for the same reasons I said last time. It's interesting. I had a note saying that the land use is not envisaged, and it isn't if you call it a car wash, but if you look at some of the case law around, is it a personal service establishment, a shop, then there's an argument that it is. But I think, look, I still thought the land use was appropriate in this circumstance. I didn't think the modern and commercial nature of the built form was problematic. I guess you could say it's different to a lot of what's in the main street already, but there is no character overlay or historic area overlay. There's no heritage adjacency overlay. None of that is applicable. So in the absence of that, I think it's enough to comply with the code. Thought the setbacks were appropriate. I agreed with the reserve matter around landscaping and the comments that you've all had to make. I think that additional condition around third-party advertising is appropriate and positive. Look, I thought there'd been a good level of negotiation between the applicant and the council with regards to traffic and safety, and I think those things have been satisfactorily addressed. I think the question around hours is a good one, and I support the suggested condition that we've done. When I look at PO 2.1, it suggests in there that development that does not impact the amenity of sensitive receivers might be appropriate through its hours of operation, then having regard to. And when you look at Part C, it talks about the extent to which the development is desired in the zone. And I take a pretty broad interpretation of that, and I take it to say to what extent is this sort of 24/7 operation envisaged in a zone, and I don't know that it particularly is upon my reading of the code. And if I was your average punter, I'm not sure that's the sort of thing that I'd expect in those circumstances. So I think it is appropriate that it's conditioned. Our draft condition at the moment refers to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week, and we've obviously heard from the applicant about a desire to have midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. I guess that's something we as a panel need to consider. But overall, in agreement with the comments you've suggested, and it sounds as if we're all in agreement. So perhaps what I might do, I might ask the staff whether or not it's possible to have some drafts of those conditions and reserve matters that were suggested. So there was the reserve, and I guess comments from Aaron too as to his views on these, but there was a reserve matter around trade waste, the condition around the hours, the condition around signage, and the condition around the acoustic measures, which I should say I definitely support. I think the case law says you should spell out what those requirements are rather than just reference them. So,
yeah, thank you through the chair. So, and appreciate some of these matters were raised earlier, so that gave me the heads up so I could have something prepared. So I'll just quickly run through them. These are marked up in red. You may I'll zoom in so you can see as easily as possible. Just in relation to trade waste, just had a further discussion with engineering services and our environmental health teams. The trade waste is considered within the wastewater application. From what I understand, trade waste can still be discharged to the communal wastewater system, but it's subject to the level of treatment to ensure that it meets our requirements. So it is a case that that will need to be demonstrated through the wastewater application, and therefore we have suggested here just a note to clarify that the wastewater application shall incorporate for the collection, treatment and disposal of trade waste to the satisfaction of council, and the applicant acknowledges the need to deal with trade waste, so I'm confident that that issue can be resolved. The hours of operation is, so we've got a condition drafted there to the effect of what was what Graham spoke to earlier around restricting terms of operating hours to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Sunday inclusive, and inclusive of all public holidays. That can be amended subject to the wishes of the panel in relation to the mention of Friday and Saturday night trading. So we can amend that. The condition 9 has been amended to now explicitly list all of the acoustic requirements, and my understanding is this is very much a approach supported by the courts to explicitly list. So it's a belts and braces type approach to reinforce requirements under the acoustic report. And the final matter which you referred to, Rachel, was around the display of signage, and that's addressed in a proposed condition there, 16. So those markups are presented to you for your consideration, could be moved at wish of the panel.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. That's excellent work from the administration. So, yeah, great.
I agree. With relatively short notice, there's a lot of work's gone into getting this right for our consideration. So I appreciate that too. But look, I notwithstanding what the applicant's representative has said about extending the hours to perhaps midnight, and I can understand fully why that would be requested. I feel nervous about agreeing to that at the moment. My suggestion would be that we stand by what I've suggested, but that is a 10 p.m. Closure or finish. Let's see how the application goes, and if there is a justification for extending those hours subsequently, an application can be made subsequently to do so. But I think it's worth holding the line for the time being to see how it goes with the suggested conditions that I've put forward, and that have been put up in red on the screen behind us.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Rachel?
Yeah, look, I concur with that. They were my thoughts exactly. I was like, I think a safe bet is to just get it up and running, see how it travels. If you don't, perhaps get any objections over a period of time and it's running smoothly, they can always apply for variation to hours, or do a test run, see how it goes. But I do think it's a safer bet to just perhaps leave it as what's up on the screen, and let's kind of see how we go. I agree with that approach.
Right, members, I'm not hearing any suggested changes to the wording, so I guess we can take that now as the recommendation, inclusive of those 3 additional conditions and the wording in the reserve matter. Is someone prepared to move in that direction? Graham, you're moving. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Rachel, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's carried unanimously. So for the benefit of those who have joined us, the application has been granted planning consent. It is subject, though, to the satisfaction of those reserved matters, the granting of building consent, and then development approval. If you do have any questions around the process from here, what happens, any rights you may have, then you're more than welcome to talk to the administration the next business day. They'll be more than happy to assist you. We do have one other assessment item to get through and another administrative item, so you're welcome to either stay with us or to depart at this point. So thank you very much for your attendance. We appreciate it. Now, members, this does take us to our final assessment item for consideration this evening. So this is an application at 102 Hamilton's Road in Springton for a change of use to animal keeping, 25 dogs, greyhounds, and associated kennel enclosures in association with an existing dwelling. The applicant, Madeline Schultz and Rebecca Wynett, in the rural zone, performance assessed, notified, and we did have representations, including some representatives to be heard. Calvin, anything you'd like to take us through as an introduction, please?
Thank you. The only thing that I would add to it is just a bit more reiteration around the nature of development and the reason why it's comprising of the 25 dogs. That is inclusive of 10 racing dogs, and then the other 15, there is a capacity in the proposal for 10 gap dogs, so that's greyhounds as pets, and then 5 pets in the home. And there is as a part of the recommendation, there is a condition to that effect as well. So that's the only thing. And then the applicants are in attendance as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, we did have 2 representatives who indicated a desire to be heard, so I might just check if they're with us. We have Miss Kylie Watson. Yeah, Kylie. Would you like to step up?
Yep. Okay. Good evening. So I'm Kylie Watson. My husband and I own the property at 152 Hamilton's Road at Springton, which is directly opposite the applicant's address. We're on a large property there, 76 acres. Pretty much, I've pretty much written everything down in when I first put it through when the application was advised to us. What I'd like to add since that point in time, though, is that we have had planning consent for a house, and it's actually come back. So we actually have planning consent to put our house on our property where we wish. And I have a printout of where that, you probably may very well have it on record, but I have a printout of where our house is going to be located. And I've also done a SAPA photo where I've taken the distance from where the house is supposed to be located to the location of the shed, which is to be the kennels of the dogs. On SAPA, it's given me a distance of 468 metres. So on reading through the planning, through the code under the animal keeping policy, under the performance outcome, the deemed to satisfy criteria is that it must be sited 500 metres or more away from a sensitive receiver. And we will be starting very shortly with a builder and putting forward building consent for our house to be located within a 500 metre perimeter from that area. So of note, that shed is also only 550 metres from the township actual area, which is really still quite close to the actual zone township area. There was a couple of other things. Obviously, we had a little bit of concern in relation to faeces and waste in regards to that many animals, that many dogs on, I believe it's only like just over an acre property. The property is located up on top. It's pretty high. It's probably close to the highest point in relation to the township. Our house is also going to be on the township side, is up on a higher point. It's really quiet. Quite quiet most of the times out there, but when there is noise, it will travel directly across at quite a height. So I am expecting that any noise that comes from that area will travel across the distance quite well, and probably have quite a bit of noise to it. But also then any waste that may be on the property, if they're using the yards for the dogs that are training on to become pets. If that waste is left out, if we have significant rains, it actually could wash down into, there's a water catchment way. That water catchment runs under the road and then comes through onto our property as well. And also then it feeds through into a Marne River feeder. And I have, in my younger years, lived in quite a dense animal husbandry area out at Lewiston, which is specifically designed for quite quite small areas of having large populations of animals being able to breed for that reason, I can pretty well attest that it's a very noisy area. And we do have dogs, obviously, in the township. If there was to be barking that was happening at this area and that noise travels towards the township, it's then also going to impact on the dogs that are in the township and encourage them to bark as well. So pretty much that's, we were not very happy when we read it and where we want to put our home. That was not what we were heading out that direction for. But I'm hoping that, our home is considered a sensitive receiver, and it really, being within that 500 metres, it can't be deemed to satisfy. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous, so sorry. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, Kylie, you made your points very well, so thank you.
Okay,
Was that all you wanted to say?
Yeah, that's pretty much my points, yeah.
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask members?
And I note you've got approval for the house, but you've started construction, or is the construction of your house commenced? Is it?
No.
It hasn't progressed.
Sorry, we've had planning. Yep. So we've put through. I've got an actual drawn out plan.
No, I've seen that.
Oh, you have?
Where you were at.
Yeah. No. So just the planning approval for the location of the house and the shed that we want to put on there. We've have had soil samples taken so that we've had the wastewater and that all approved. So there's no reason, once building plans are submitted and stuff, but everything is applicable to where we want to put our house.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. You can probably hear me anyway. Mine's a bit of a weird question, and you may not be aware of this, but this is one part of the process should you get approval for what you're wanting to do. But were you aware that under council's bylaws that you also need to get permission to keep more than a certain number of dogs? Because I wouldn't want you to... Yeah. Oh, you're the... Sorry, wake up, Rachel. Yeah.
You can just save that one for 10 minutes' time. Yeah. Yes.
But yes, I did. Well, I actually looked that up, and I did see that there is a limit of 3 dogs, unless you're in applying for working dogs, where you can apply for an exemption. But I still don't believe that it's anywhere near the amount of 25 dogs. So.
No, all good. Any further questions for Kylie? No. In that case, thank you, Kylie. You did make your points well, so thank you. Now, I had Mr. Mark Leslie as well. Mark with us? No? Okay. In that case, I'm happy to hear from the applicants now. So I understand we have Madeline and Rebecca with us. Madeline, is it? Yeah, excellent. So.
Hello. Sorry. I'm very well aware that this application is not going to make everybody happy, and I do take very seriously your considerations and everyone's, and as Calvin can attest, when I got all of the recommendations, I thoroughly went through every single one of them to see how I personally could make things easier. Some of those things are that racing greyhounds have got a very strict timeline of how things have to be done, and it does get done every day. I'm not the only person that does these greyhounds. I have 2 workers as well as my housemate, so there's a total of 4 of us that will be managing all the dogs. To reduce the noise as much as possible. Obviously, I can't say that I'm going to get rid of the noise because that's just not possible. I have insulated the shed. All the outside kennels are also insulated. They all have radios to block out white noise. They all have fans and everything, which also helps block out white noise. Where the dogs are currently located is actually a residential area now. It was recently made residential, and the dogs around them bark consistently all the time, but these greyhounds barely bark. I have recommendations from people saying, like, attesting to that. We've never had a council complaint where we are when literally you walk outside and there's houses all around you now. A lot of people didn't even realise that there was 10 race dogs on the property. In regards to the feces and everything, GRSA, welfare, come out and do spot checks regularly, and we are upheld to quite a high standard. With someone with OCD, I'm a very clean person. I hate mess. Yards are cleaned up after every dog is removed from that yard. I entice my dogs all the time with toys, with treats, with bones and stuff to not only help their health but to keep them busy. It's less time that they are barking or annoying anybody. I also have cameras in the sheds and pointing towards the outside yards so I can see what they're doing. My cameras are audio as well, so I can, if they are making noise, I can actually on my phone speak to the dogs and tell them to be quiet. But as I said, there are also multiple people that help me in this operation. It's not just a one-person job.
Thanks, Madeline. Made your points well. Questions, members? Would you now like to, Rachel, to pose
I can ask
your
my question now.
Yes.
Do you remember what I said? Because the reason I asked that about the bylaw and getting the permission under the bylaw is I just wanted to know if you'd had those conversations with your general inspectors. Do they do that administer that bylaw? Because, you know, you'd hate for you to get planning consent, but then you run into difficulty under the bylaw getting permission to keep more than a certain number of dogs. So I was just wondering whether or not you'd gone down that path and had those discussions or whether you were aware of that.
So I'm not aware of that. The GRSA have basically every greyhound trainer has gone through the same process that I'm currently going through. I wasn't aware that there was a second part to that.
I just more so wanted to make you aware of it. It's just more so that you've got no hidden, that this is one part under a different piece of legislation, but you still probably might have another hurdle. Yeah.
Yeah, I might just speak to that. So, we understand there's a kennel licence, I think it is, that applies under Dog and Cat Management Act. So we do liaise quite closely with the community safety team in relation to aligning their feedback in relation to the kennel licence with that of a development application. So the advice we've had is that this proposal appears to be in line with their general operational requirements and their conditions. So if there is a further licence that they need for kennel keeping, that we believe that would be consistent with between the requirements. And very much that was the purpose of trying to understand what the requirements were so that we were doing something that was complementary and not in conflict with one another. So, thanks.
Yes.
It's regards to waste systems. I just wasn't clear whether there is going to be a separate system for the dogs versus what is the existing dwelling. Are they going to be two separate systems or an upgrade to take on the additional waste? I just wanted to qualify that.
So from what I have, the information that I've received, it's not necessary in this case. So the house is deemed to have enough that it's not necessary. And given the fact that it's cleaned up quite quickly, that's the advice that I was given.
Just as a follow-up then to that, where is the waste taken to after it's cleaned up? Do you dispose of it on site or does it go somewhere else?
So at the current site, we have a green bin So all of the waste goes in the green bin. However, because I'm classed as rural where I am currently, I don't have a green bin. I am quite happy to get a green bin, and my real estate have said they're quite happy to support that. Otherwise, they're also happy to support getting a second red bin. So currently, the dogs, I have like little buckets lined with bin liners, and that's what it goes into, and then it gets put into the bin after every use. So
Follow-up questions, not in relation to animal waste. I'm just trying to get my head around the split between racing greyhounds, I mean, there's greyhounds that you're training for racing, versus greyhounds that become pets after their racing career. Are you keeping the greyhounds as pets, or are you giving them away or selling them? How's that part of the business work?
no, so I don't keep them. So the Greyhound Racing SA have got a program called the GAP program, which is basically what happens is the dog retires, and then the dog gets desexed, has all of its like dental treatment done, and then it goes on a list. And that list is basically a list for them to get a home. So I don't sell them, like I don't charge people for them. They go on a list with GAP SA, or there's other independent GAP programs as well. They go on those lists, and then when a suitable applicant comes along, that person meets them, all of that sort of stuff. But there's dogs that currently wait, I have recently had a dog wait 18 months to get a home after retiring. So the number of dogs on the property is for that purpose alone, because I still need to be able to make money whilst I'm feeding dogs that aren't making any money, and I'm not going to just throw dogs out because they're not making me any money. I'm not like, that's why I have a second job. I worked for forestry for 5 years. So I actually go above and beyond what any normal trainer would do. I bring the dogs inside. I teach them how to be a dog, like a pet. I let them run around with my pets. I also have a cat, so I can, if they're cat friendly, if they're not cat friendly. So it's basically teaching them how to be a pet so they can get a home.
Final question, if I may. The racing greyhounds that you've got, or you would like to have, I think you have a walking machine, did you say, for training purposes? But they're running dogs, that's their job, to race. Where do they go for training purposes? Where do you take them to practice running, or don't you? I don't know enough about the way the greyhound industry works, so please excuse my ignorance.
Sure. Every dog is different. It depends on the distance that they go. Not every dog can run 700 metres. So it really depends. The walking machine is basically the main source of training that I use. It helps prevent injuries and just general soreness when they're not racing. Walking machines are also really good for injured dogs to help them slowly come back. But in the way of running them, you've got all of the racing tracks around have got what we call a slipping track. So it's basically just like I think it's like 400 metre straight track, and we just go and slip them up there.
Just something further to what Graham was saying. So with the GAP dogs, would it be fair to say that you won't always have 15? Like it's 15 max, but you might have like 5 or something, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct. So just because I'm applying for 25 dogs does not mean there's going to be 25 dogs there. It's literally just because the GAP waiting list is so long at the moment. And like I said, I've just had a dog waiting 18 months to be rehomed. And I can't afford to lose race kennels for GAP dogs. So it's just a buffer to help me doesn't mean there's always going to be that amount of dogs there.
Any further I'm sorry, I can't. The way the process works is that, representatives get their opportunity and applicants do, and I can't then take further questions. I'm sorry. So, but you are welcome to observe the rest of it. Any further questions, members, that you have of the applicant? No. Okay, in that case, thank you, Madeline, appreciate that. Now, members, you do have a thorough report before you. You heard from the representative and the applicant and have all of the documentation, and there is a recommendation to grant planning consent, but it is subject to that reserved matter and several conditions. What are your views in respect of this one? Sure.
Look, I was of two minds, to be honest, about this application, but having heard from both the representative and the applicant, and with the conditions that are proposed, I think it is supportable, principally because the site is remote from houses, and whether it's 450, 60 or 500 metres from the nearest sensitive receptor, those standards in the code are not mandatory. They are effectively guidelines to give effect to the performance outcome. So I think on balance, from what I've heard from the applicant, with the I think the measures that are proposed be put in place, the limit on the number of dogs to be housed at or kept at any one time on the premises, I think this application can be supported. As I said, if there were houses close by and other sensitive receptors close by, and by close by I mean within 100 or 200 metres, not the 460 metres plus that we're talking about here, I think it'd be a different matter. But based on what I've seen and heard and what I've read, I think the application on balance is deserving of consent.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to go. Look, I agree with those comments. I mean, from all accounts and what I've read through and what I've gleaned from what people have spoken to, it appears it'll be well managed. I guess a kennel facility, it's not kind of dissimilar to some of the envisaged uses that are actually contemplated in the zone. And part of my thinking around supporting it is that it is surrounded by larger land holdings. You know, I think it was 460 metres plus to the nearest sensitive receiver. So I was fairly comfortable in that aspect. I'm a little bit confused about the wastewater in that I think the applicant had indicated that they said that it was all okay, yet we have a reserve matter saying that there is wastewater required. So I'd just like to understand which one it is, if I could.
I mean, I did skip over the bit where you can ask the administration any questions, so do feel free.
Yeah, that's fine, I can answer that. There is not, at least to date of the writing of the report, there wasn't a application received yet, so it is still subject to an assessment. But there has been preliminary advice from the health officer to the applicant of the proposal regarding the scope of what that would assess. It's not determined whether an upgrade to the system would be required, but there is preliminary advice provided. One of the main things with the washing of the dogs is basically that water and the capacity of the wastewater system to go in there. It does need an application regardless, because there does need to be a form of trap to separate the dog fur or whatever other solids are in there before it goes into the system as well.
Thank you. That absolutely answers my question. So on that basis, if we do have a reserve matter, I was just wanting, and look, put it out to other members if they think it's appropriate, but another condition added just saying that the approved wastewater system shall be installed and operational prior to establishment of the use. So just making sure that it's in place and operational prior to the dogs actually being on there and being washed, because sometimes there might be a mismatch. So I just think making sure that that is installed and operational. Leave it up to other members to have a view on that.
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying that. That was kind of my question. I probably didn't word it correctly. Understanding washdown areas, etc., for animals do require additional drainage and treatment. Look, I think the report was really well written, and the level of detail in that application, I was really satisfied. Again, in terms of the zoning, it's not uncommon, you know, primary production areas having sheep and cows and other animals, so I'm not concerned either with the distance to any sensitive receivers, because it's no different from using that land for pastoral reasons as well. And thank you to the applicant as well for just qualifying some of those additional questions which Graham asked as well. So I'm satisfied with this application.
Look, and again, I have similar views, members. I, first of all, satisfied, not seriously variance, didn't undermine the character values. It's interesting when you look at the envisaged uses in PO 1.1 because, or DPF 1.1, because while this form of animal keeping isn't envisaged, forms that are include horse keeping, farming, intensive animal husbandry, low intensive animal husbandry, and in a way, I think this use has lower impacts, as you just said, compared to some of those. So while it's not necessarily a primary production use, obviously, this land can't be used for primary production purposes given its size and location. So I feel that this is a use that's not out of character with I guess the surrounding area. Obviously, the key comes down to management and making sure they won't have any negative impacts, and I was satisfied. I think, having seen similar applications in the past, I actually think the documentation that was submitted was to a high standard. I think having items such as, things to keep the dogs entertained, the ability for them to be taken inside, the quality of the kenneling, I think all of those things will speak in favour of the proposal. I think I certainly take the points from the representative because it is important where there are setback guidelines that I think they're stuck to, but they typically are guidelines and they're not necessarily a reflection on, I guess, a metre limit that has to be met, because there will always be site conditions and conditions that relate to the facility itself that might either mitigate or have a requirement for a greater buffer. And I was satisfied in this instance that 460 metres was enough to mitigate against any sort of negative impacts. I thought it was of a relatively low scale. I think the bushfire plan was beneficial. So for those reasons, I was supportive also. And I subject to what our assessment manager thinks, I don't think the additional condition would hurt in any way. I think there's the ability to add conditions once the reserve matter is satisfied, but whether we did that now or not, I don't think particularly matters. So might ask the administration for some suggested wording if you think that's appropriate. And again, it sounds as if we're all in agreement. Did any member want to speak further on it, or are you happy for me to look at the recommendations here? Well, the first recommendation is that the proposal is not seriously a variance. Do we have someone prepared to move that way? Rachel, thank you. Is there a seconder? Graham, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. The second recommendation is that the objects of the Character Preservation Act are not being negatively impacted by this proposal. Rachel, thank you. And Graham, thank you again. All those in favour? It's carried. Now, just before we look at the third recommendation, do you have some wording, Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. So I've simply added some words onto the back of recommending condition 2 to just be explicit that the authorised wastewater system shall be installed prior to commencement of use and shall remain in good working condition in compliance with the wastewater approval at all times thereafter.
All right, members, well, this is a recommendation that we grant planning consent subject to the reserved matter and those conditions. Graham, you're moving, thank you. Sarah, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's carried unanimously. So, for the benefit of those who have joined us, that application has been granted planning consent, but it is subject to the satisfaction of that reserve matter, building consent, development approval. Now, I apologise, I wasn't trying to be deliberately obstructive before, but our meeting procedures specify the way the meeting runs. So, if you do have any questions around the decision, what that means, what your rights are, then please do talk to the administration the next business day, because they'll be more than happy to help all of you. So we do have one more administrative item to get through, so you are welcome to either leave us at this point or stay. So thank you very much for your attendance. Now, members, I'm not having a great night in terms of my... No, no, well, it was... When we got to the last set of recommendations for the car wash, I did not run through number 1 and 2, which was the seriously of variance and the character preservation, which our administration duly picked me up on. So, can I ask whether someone would be prepared to move that seriously of variance motion? Graham, thank you, and seconded. Sarah, thank you. Well, we pretty much could, but we'll do carried, and then I'll ask for the second one around character preservation. Yes, so thank you. We've got Rachel and then Graham. All those in favour? No. We're still in the panel format, so of all the panels I sit on, I think 2 do it one way and 3 do it the other, so I'm constantly getting it mixed up, but... They are. So, members, we don't have any reviews of decisions of the assessment manager. We did have a report in other business from our assessment manager around the quarterly report. Do you want to speak to that at all, Aaron?
Oh, not really. Just to mention that, yeah, this is the quarterly report that you would have seen for the previous quarter. I think we had provided, but these quarters come around very quickly, so you will see these sort of every 3 months. So just for your information and giving you, just to remind you, I guess, a summary of applications are being determined under delegation, so but still sitting with the panel as the relevant authority. So happy to take any questions, but yeah, very much just for information.
Thanks, Aaron. Do we have any questions, members, or is someone prepared to move that the report be received? Sure, excellent. Well, I'll take you as the seconder, Graham. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So, thank you, Aaron. That's good information, I think, that the panel receives. Good stuff. Now, is there any other business from the panel? No? Any other business from the administration, Aaron?
No.
Members, there are no confidential reports. The next meeting's due to be held on the 3rd of June. I am happy to declare the meeting closed at 6:28 p.m. Thank you, members, for your attendance and considered debate on some complex items. And thank you to the administration. The quality of reports is outstanding, so thank you for all your support.